The origins of the Eastern Orthodox Church trace directly to the earliest Christian communities established in the 1st century within the Eastern Mediterranean, particularly in Jerusalem, Antioch, and various cities of Asia Minor. These communities developed during a period marked by Roman imperial governance, Jewish religious structures, and Hellenistic cultural influence. At the core of these communities was an organizational structure composed of bishops, presbyters, and deacons. Bishops, referred to in contemporary records as episkopoi, exercised oversight of local congregations and coordinated doctrinal and liturgical matters. Presbyters, or elders, assisted in leadership, while deacons were charged with administrative duties and practical support of the community. Letters attributed to the apostles, including those of Paul, Peter, and John, served both as doctrinal guidance and as organizational instruction. These letters, preserved in the New Testament corpus, demonstrate the earliest extant records of church structure and administration in the eastern regions. Jerusalem, as the original center of the movement, functioned as the primary site of early communal worship and coordination. The city's status as a provincial center in Judea under Roman oversight provided both opportunities and constraints. Jewish authorities, in coordination with Roman governance, exercised control over religious expression, resulting in a complex environment in which early Christian communities operated. Within this framework, the Jerusalem Church is historically documented as led initially by James, the brother of Jesus, recognized as the first bishop of Jerusalem. This leadership is referenced in Paul's epistle to the Galatians, 1:18-19, and in the Acts of the Apostles, Acts 15 verses 13-21, which records James' role in the Council of Jerusalem, establishing an early precedent for authoritative decision-making among the apostolic community. From Jerusalem, Christianity spread along established trade and communication networks throughout the eastern Mediterranean. Antioch, situated in Roman Syria, became a critical center of early Christian activity. Acts 11 verse 26 records the emergence of the term Christian within the Antiochene community, indicating both an organized identity and the consolidation of a multi-ethnic congregation. Antioch functioned as the primary departure point for missionary activity eastward and westward, with Paul and Barnabas undertaking missions throughout Asia Minor and the Aegean. Archaeological evidence, including inscriptions and early house church remains, supports the existence of organized communities in cities such as Ephesus, Smyrna, and Corinth by the mid-1st century. Letters sent by Paul to these communities, preserved in the New Testament, e.g., 1 Corinthians, Philippians, Galatians, provide contemporary documentation of doctrinal instruction, disciplinary measures, and governance, reflecting the structured nature of these early congregations. The organization of the Eastern communities was codified through practices attested in the letters of Ignatius of Antioch, dated to the early 2nd century but reflecting precedents from the 1st century. Ignatius emphasizes the role of a single bishop in each city overseeing presbyters and deacons, reflecting a continuity with the apostolic model. Although Ignatius' letters post-date 70 AD, they rely on established traditions from the apostolic foundations and indicate that these hierarchical structures were already taking shape in the 1st century. This early episcopal oversight functioned in part to maintain doctrinal consistency, particularly in response to divergent interpretations of Christ's teachings that began to emerge in the decades following the crucifixion of Jesus. The Apostle Paul's recorded journeys, preserved in Acts 13 to 28 and in his epistles, provide specific evidence for the spread of Christianity into Asia Minor, including Pisidian Antioch, Iconium, Lystra, and Derbe. These accounts document interactions with both Jewish synagogues and Hellenistic populations, highlighting the bilingual and multicultural nature of early Eastern Christian communities. Roman administrative records, including provincial edicts, provide indirect confirmation of Paul's presence, particularly in his Roman trial as documented in Acts 25 to 28. These communities, established in cities with established civic infrastructure, utilized private homes for assembly and worship, as evidenced by archaeological remains such as the Duropos House Church, mid-3rd century, reflecting continuity of early practices. The period between 30 and 70 AD is marked by several documented crises that shaped the organization and expansion of the Eastern communities. The destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD by Roman forces under Titus, following the First Jewish-Roman War, resulted in the significant dispersion of Jewish and Christian populations. During this foundational period, liturgical practices developed in accordance with Jewish precedents while incorporating emerging Christian interpretations. The observance of the Eucharist, the structure of baptism, and assembly patterns are documented indirectly in Paul's letters, 1 Corinthians 11 verses 23 to 29, Romans 6 verses 3 to 5. These practices indicate that early Eastern communities maintained ritual continuity across regions, ensuring cohesion despite geographic dispersion. The roles of bishops and presbyters included oversight of these rites, regulation of communal participation, and maintenance of doctrinal integrity, reflecting the administrative sophistication of early Eastern Christianity. In addition to doctrinal and liturgical development, early Eastern Christian communities maintained a correspondence network to manage disputes and unify practices. Paul's letters frequently address questions of discipline, moral conduct, and doctrinal conformity, reflecting the role of bishops as arbiters and communicators. The letter of Clement to the Corinthians, c. 96 AD, further documents intervention by the Roman Church in Eastern matters, suggesting an emerging recognition of interregional oversight while maintaining local episcopal authority. This correspondence evidences the early integration of Eastern communities into a broader network that would later form the foundation for the Pentarchy system. The Greek-speaking communities of Asia Minor played a particularly formative role in shaping what would later be recognized as the Eastern Orthodox Church. These communities, influenced by Hellenistic philosophical traditions and Roman civic structures, developed a liturgical and administrative identity distinct from Latin-speaking Western communities. Evidence from inscriptions, early catechetical texts, and references in contemporary writings, e.g., the Didache, c. late 1st century, indicates that these communities preserved common doctrinal formulations, including Christological affirmations and baptismal instruction, which provided continuity into subsequent centuries. By the end of the 1st century, the Eastern Christian communities exhibited a coherent organizational and theological structure. Bishops coordinated local presbyters and deacons, maintained correspondence with other sees, and ensured doctrinal fidelity as evidenced in the preserved letters of Paul and early church fathers. Communities in Antioch, Ephesus, Smyrna, and Corinth functioned both as centers for worship and as hubs for missionary activity, providing a network for the dissemination of doctrine throughout Asia Minor and the Aegean. This period laid the structural, liturgical, and doctrinal foundations upon which the later Eastern Orthodox Church would develop, ensuring continuity from the apostolic era into subsequent centuries of growth, persecution, and formalization. The Eastern communities of this period maintained continuity in governance, ritual, and teaching despite the absence of formal councils or codified canon law. The structure of episcopal oversight, documented in letters and early writings, ensured that local deviations in practice or belief could be addressed through established channels. The integration of Jewish liturgical patterns, combined with Hellenistic and Roman administrative models, facilitated both the resilience and the spread of these communities across the Eastern Mediterranean. By 70 AD, the dispersion resulting from the destruction of Jerusalem accelerated the expansion of Eastern Christianity, consolidating Antioch and Asia Minor as central nodes in a network of interconnected communities adhering to common practices and doctrinal formulations. This period also established the precedent for the hierarchical and regional organization that would later characterize the Eastern Orthodox Church. The model of local bishops overseeing multiple presbyters and deacons, coordinated across regional centers such as Antioch, Alexandria, and Jerusalem, created a governance structure resilient to geographic and political pressures. The reliance on letters and maintained correspondence among communities ensured that emerging doctrinal or disciplinary issues were addressed consistently. This early organizational framework, documented in letters, acts, and writings of church fathers, constitutes the verifiable foundation for the ecclesiastical continuity observed in the Eastern Orthodox Church in subsequent centuries. Following the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, the Christian communities of the Eastern Mediterranean entered a period characterized by both demographic dispersal and structural consolidation. These communities relocated primarily to cities such as Antioch, Alexandria, and the various urban centers of Asia Minor. Archaeological evidence and inscriptions indicate that these relocated groups continued to maintain structured assemblies, worship practices, and hierarchical oversight under bishops, reflecting continuity from the apostolic period. During the latter 1st century and the entirety of the 2nd century, the Eastern Christian communities experienced intermittent persecutions under Roman imperial authority. Tacitus Annals 15.44 records early punitive measures under Emperor Nero following the fire of Rome in 64 AD, with documented implications for Christians residing in both urban Roman and provincial contexts. While Nero's direct influence over the eastern provinces was limited, these punitive measures set a precedent for imperial scrutiny of Christian groups. Subsequent emperors, including Domitian, 81 to 96 AD, executed targeted measures against Jewish and Christian populations, as documented in Roman administrative correspondence and corroborated by epistolary references in early Christian texts. In the first half of the 2nd century, the writings of Ignatius of Antioch, c. 110 AD, provide direct documentation of the organizational and hierarchical nature of Eastern Christian communities under persecution. Ignatius, in his letters to the churches of Ephesus, Smyrna, and Philadelphia, details the authority of the bishop as a singular overseer of the local congregation, coordinated with presbyters and deacons. These letters serve as contemporary evidence for episcopal structure, disciplinary procedures, and liturgical practices, including the administration of the Eucharist. The distribution of these letters across multiple cities confirms the existence of a coordinated network of Eastern Christian communities responding to both doctrinal and organizational needs. The growth of Christian communities in Asia Minor, Syria, and Egypt during this period is corroborated by epistolary and archaeological evidence. Paul's letters, though composed before this period, continued to circulate and influence local ecclesiastical practice. The letter of Polycarp to the Philippians, c. 110 to 140 AD, and the martyrdom of Polycarp, mid-2nd century, provide further evidence of community cohesion, episcopal authority, and ritual observance within the eastern provinces. These texts document the response of Christian communities to Roman scrutiny, while maintaining internal hierarchical oversight. Polycarp's correspondence demonstrates the recognition of regional bishops and indicates an early system of mutual accountability among Eastern churches. Persecution during the reign of Emperor Decius, 249 to 251 AD, represents the first empire-wide edict requiring public sacrifices to Roman gods, documented in surviving imperial rescripts. Eastern communities were compelled to demonstrate civic loyalty through participation in imperial cult practices. Surviving letters and church records, including those referenced in Eusebius' Ecclesiastical History, Book 6, provide direct documentation of the consequences for noncompliance, including imprisonment, confiscation of property, and execution. These measures, although limited in duration, forced Eastern communities to develop documented procedures for maintaining membership rolls, regulating sacramental participation, and preserving doctrinal integrity during periods of external pressure. The Valerian persecution, 253 to 260 AD, and subsequent measures under Emperor Gallienus further shaped the administrative and hierarchical capacities of the Eastern Church. Valerian's edicts, recorded in surviving imperial letters and inscriptions, mandated the arrest and execution of bishops, presbyters, and deacons who refused to participate in civic religious rites. Contemporary church accounts, including those summarized in Eusebius, detail the arrest of bishops in Antioch and Alexandria, illustrating the centrality of episcopal leadership in the eastern provinces. The necessity of maintaining ecclesiastical function under these conditions resulted in formalized procedures for succession of bishops, documentation of community practices, and the codification of liturgical norms, which are preserved indirectly through later canonical collections. The diocesan and regional structures that emerged in the eastern provinces during this period laid the foundation for later formal ecclesiastical hierarchies. Antioch, Alexandria, and Jerusalem functioned as major episcopal centers, with documented correspondence indicating coordination among bishops and presbyters. The Council of Carthage, c. 251 AD, though primarily a Western African gathering, referenced Eastern practices and the transmission of letters from Eastern bishops, suggesting a degree of inter-regional communication. These structures were maintained despite imperial interventions and indicate that the Eastern communities developed robust administrative and communicative mechanisms to preserve continuity of worship, doctrinal teaching, and hierarchical oversight. In addition to external persecution, internal challenges prompted the Eastern communities to formalize doctrinal cohesion. Letters of Ignatius, Polycarp, and later Justin Martyr, c. 100 to 165 AD, document responses to divergent theological interpretations within local congregations, including disputes over Christological understanding and liturgical practice. Justin Martyr's First Apology, c. 155 AD, provides the earliest documented description of public Christian worship, including readings of Scripture, instruction by bishops, prayers, and the Eucharistic celebration. This apologia also serves as evidence of the distinct Eastern liturgical form that emerged, reflecting both continuity with Jewish ritual precedent and adaptation to the Hellenistic context. The structural and doctrinal organization of Eastern Christianity was further tested during the Decian persecution. Surviving letters and regional synodical decisions document measures to address lapsy, those who had lapsed under persecution and sought readmission to the Church. Eastern bishops developed procedural standards for reconciliation, illustrating the codification of ecclesiastical governance and discipline. These procedures demonstrate the systematic administration of church life, which would later form the basis for canonical regulations codified in subsequent centuries. The latter third of the 2nd century and early 3rd century witnessed increasing differentiation between Greek-speaking Eastern communities and Latin-speaking Western communities. The cultural and linguistic distinctions influenced liturgical expression, episcopal administration, and theological formulation. Evidence from inscriptions, early catechetical texts, and correspondence indicates that Eastern communities increasingly employed Greek as the lingua franca for liturgy, correspondence, and theological discussion, while preserving localized practices adapted to regional contexts. This linguistic cohesion facilitated communication across the Eastern provinces, allowing for consistent doctrinal instruction and administrative coordination among cities such as Antioch, Ephesus, Smyrna, and Alexandria. The persecution under Emperor Diocletian, 303 to 311 AD, documented in surviving imperial edicts and summarized by Eusebius in Ecclesiastical History, Book 8, represents the most severe and systematic attempt to suppress Eastern Christian communities before imperial recognition. Diocletian issued a series of rescripts mandating the destruction of churches, the confiscation of Christian texts, and the arrest of bishops, presbyters, and deacons. Contemporary accounts document the arrest and execution of bishops in Alexandria, Antioch, and Gaza, illustrating the centrality of episcopal leadership within Eastern Christianity. Surviving martyr acts, though written shortly after the events, corroborate administrative and liturgical continuity, including the maintenance of sacramental practice and episcopal succession during periods of extreme external pressure. Throughout this period, Eastern Christian communities maintained correspondence networks for doctrinal, administrative, and disciplinary purposes. Letters preserved in later compilations, including those cited by Eusebius, demonstrate the coordination of bishops across Antioch, Alexandria, Jerusalem, and the provinces of Asia Minor. These communications regulated the appointment of presbyters and deacons, adjudicated disputes over ritual practice, and ensured the transmission of doctrinal standards. This correspondence network functioned as a practical instrument for preserving unity among geographically dispersed communities, enabling resilience under persecution. The organizational sophistication of Eastern Christian communities during 70 to 313 AD is further documented through archaeological and epigraphic evidence. Inscriptions from house churches in Asia Minor and Egypt record the presence of bishops and presbyters, including funerary inscriptions identifying ecclesiastical office. These inscriptions provide verifiable evidence of hierarchical structures, administrative roles, and continuity of governance. Excavated house church plans indicate designated spaces for assembly, instruction, and Eucharistic celebration, confirming the standardized nature of liturgical practice across multiple regions. By 313 AD, Eastern Christianity had developed a cohesive hierarchical and liturgical identity, despite recurring periods of persecution. Bishops presided over local communities, coordinated regional oversight with neighboring sees, and maintained continuity in ritual practice and doctrinal instruction. Greek-speaking communities in Asia Minor, Antioch, and Alexandria had become central to the development of liturgical and administrative norms that would inform later structures of the Eastern Orthodox Church. The codified roles of bishops, presbyters, and deacons, combined with the procedural handling of lapsi, succession planning, and intercommunity correspondence, established an organizational framework resilient to both external pressures and internal divergences. The year 313 AD marks a decisive transition in the history of Eastern Christianity with the issuance of the Edict of Milan by Emperor Constantine I, granting formal religious tolerance to Christians across the Roman Empire. Surviving imperial letters and administrative records confirm that this edict provided legal recognition to Christian communities, ending systematic empire-wide persecution while allowing continued Roman oversight. The edict established freedom for Christians to assemble, maintain ecclesiastical property, and conduct worship without interference, laying the foundation for institutional and hierarchical consolidation across the eastern provinces. Following the Edict of Milan, Constantine actively engaged in ecclesiastical matters, establishing correspondence with prominent bishops and participating indirectly in doctrinal adjudication. His involvement is documented in letters exchanged with bishops, particularly the correspondence with Bishop Hosius of Corduba, preserved in council records, which reveal imperial coordination with episcopal authority to maintain unity within the empire. Constantine's interest in doctrinal matters reflects the integration of Eastern Christian communities into the administrative structure of the imperial state, which had already begun evolving through the episcopal networks established during the periods of persecution. The first major formal assembly under imperial sanction, the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, provides documented evidence for the consolidation of Eastern ecclesiastical structure. Contemporary records, including the Nicene Creed, preserved in council acts, indicate the presence of 318 bishops, representing sees across the eastern provinces, including prominent centers such as Antioch, Alexandria, Jerusalem, and Ephesus. The council addressed questions of Christological formulation, including debates concerning the relationship of the Son to the Father, resulting in the establishment of the Nicene Creed as the formal doctrinal statement. The council also issued canons addressing episcopal authority, liturgical practice, and interregional coordination, including documented rules for the status of metropolitan bishops relative to provincial oversight. Constantinople's foundation as the new imperial capital in 330 AD, as documented in imperial edicts and contemporary chronicles, further enhanced the prominence of the Eastern Church. By imperial designation, Constantinople was granted privileges second only to Rome among the major sees, establishing the precedent for later recognition of its ecclesiastical authority. Bishops of Constantinople participated in regional synods and maintained correspondence with Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem, as evidenced by surviving letters preserved in canonical collections. This elevation provided an administrative anchor for Eastern Christian communities, consolidating hierarchical authority under the emerging structure of metropolitan oversight. The organizational hierarchy of the Eastern Church during this period is corroborated by numerous primary sources. Letters of Athanasius of Alexandria, including those preserved in the Athanasius Correspondence, provide detailed documentation of episcopal governance, doctrinal instruction, and administrative oversight within the Alexandrian province. These letters demonstrate the communication networks among Eastern sees, indicating coordinated responses to doctrinal disputes and the distribution of canonical decisions. Similar evidence is found in the letters of Eusebius of Caesarea, whose historical works record both the administrative structures of local bishoprics and their integration into the imperial system following the Edict of Milan. The period following Nicaea witnessed continued efforts to maintain doctrinal coherence across the eastern provinces. The Arian controversy, documented extensively in the Nicene Council Acts and in the writings of Athanasius, prompted successive regional synods to reinforce Nicene orthodoxy. Eastern bishops, including those of Antioch, Alexandria, and Jerusalem, coordinated responses through letters, local synods, and consultation with Constantinople. These documented measures demonstrate the development of a coherent administrative and doctrinal system within Eastern Christianity, which relied upon episcopal oversight, correspondence, and canonical enforcement rather than informal authority or anecdotal tradition. Liturgical practices in the eastern provinces were formalized during this period, with evidence from letters, council acts, and catechetical documents. Baptismal rites, Eucharistic observance, and the celebration of feasts, including Pacha, were standardized through regional consensus. The Council of Nicaea issued canons concerning the date of Pacha, mandating uniformity across provinces and explicitly delineating the responsibilities of bishops in enforcing observance. Contemporary correspondence confirms the communication of these directives to dioceses in Asia Minor, Syria, and Egypt, indicating both centralized coordination and localized enforcement mechanisms. The establishment of Constantinople as an ecclesiastical center accelerated the administrative integration of eastern provinces. Imperial documents record the creation of metropolitan jurisdictions, each coordinated by the bishop of the provincial capital and subordinate to regional episcopal authority. These jurisdictions were responsible for maintaining clerical oversight, implementing council decisions, and supervising the ordination of presbyters and deacons. Archaeological evidence, including early church foundations and inscriptions in Constantinople, Ephesus, and Antioch, corroborates the presence of hierarchical organization and functional diocesan structures consistent with the canons issued by Nicaea. The episcopal authority in the Eastern Church was further reinforced by the documented suppression of heterodox movements. Letters from Athanasius to Eastern bishops detail measures taken to remove clergy adhering to Arian positions, ensuring compliance with Nicene orthodoxy. These measures involved the convening of regional synods, documented in the records preserved in later canonical collections, illustrating the procedural mechanisms by which bishops exercised oversight. Similarly, correspondence from Eusebius of Nicomedia, although later associated with opposition to Nicene decisions, provides contemporaneous evidence of coordinated administrative structures and the capacity of bishops to influence regional practice. During the late 4th century, The Council of Constantinople in 381 AD represented the culmination of Eastern ecclesiastical consolidation under imperial recognition. The council reaffirmed the Nicene Creed and elaborated upon Trinitarian doctrine, addressing ongoing theological disputes documented in letters and synodal records. Eastern bishops participated alongside representatives from the Western provinces, with preserved acts indicating agreement on hierarchical and doctrinal structures. The council also recognized the elevated status of Constantinople, explicitly confirming its second rank after Rome based on imperial designation, providing legal and canonical recognition for the metropolitan authority exercised by its bishop over surrounding provinces. The period from 313 to 381 AD also witnessed the continued integration of monastic communities into Eastern ecclesiastical structures. Contemporary hagiographical records, including the life of Anthony by Athanasius, c. 360 AD, provide documentation of monastic organization, ascetic practices, and their interaction with local bishops. These texts illustrate the role of monastic communities in reinforcing liturgical and doctrinal norms, serving as centers for education, copying of texts, and regional coordination. Monastic settlements in Egypt, Syria, and Asia Minor maintained correspondence with bishops, providing an additional layer of administrative and spiritual oversight within the Eastern Church. Eastern Christian communities expanded in urban and rural areas during this period, supported by imperial patronage following the Edict of Milan. Archaeological evidence demonstrates the construction of basilicas and assembly halls in Constantinople, Antioch, Ephesus, and Alexandria, reflecting both civic and ecclesiastical collaboration. Inscriptions and dedicatory texts document the funding of these structures, the roles of bishops in oversight, and the maintenance of liturgical practices in alignment with Nicene directives. These buildings functioned as focal points for community cohesion, administrative coordination, and doctrinal instruction. Imperial correspondence and legal codifications during Constantine's reign further institutionalized Eastern ecclesiastical authority. Surviving letters demonstrate the emperor's role in confirming episcopal appointments, arbitrating disputes between bishops, and providing legal protection for church property. The integration of imperial and ecclesiastical administration facilitated the coordination of doctrinal instruction, liturgical observance, and hierarchical oversight across the provinces, contributing to the formalization of practices that would define Eastern Christianity in the subsequent centuries. The period also produced significant documentary evidence of doctrinal education and catechesis. Texts such as the catechetical lectures of Cyril of Jerusalem, late 4th century, record instructions for baptism, Eucharistic participation, and moral conduct within Eastern Christian communities. These lectures, while post-dating the Edict of Milan, reflect practices and organizational structures that emerged in the preceding decades under imperial recognition and episcopal guidance. The preservation of these texts demonstrates the continuity of administrative, doctrinal, and liturgical systems across the Eastern provinces. By the close of the 4th century, the Eastern Church had developed a cohesive and hierarchically organized structure, integrating metropolitan oversight, episcopal authority, and regional coordination. Councils at Nicaea, 325, and Constantinople, 381, codified doctrinal orthodoxy, standardized liturgical practice, and formalized the status of key sees, particularly Constantinople, Antioch, Alexandria, and Jerusalem. Letters, synodal records, and archaeological evidence corroborate the administrative, doctrinal, and liturgical structures established during this period, providing verifiable documentation of a coherent ecclesiastical system. The consolidation of the Eastern Church between 313 and 381 AD established the framework for subsequent ecclesiastical developments, including the elaboration of canonical law, the coordination of missionary activity, and the resolution of doctrinal disputes. Bishops exercised authority over clergy and laity, maintained correspondence to enforce doctrinal and liturgical norms, and coordinated with imperial authorities to protect church interests. The structures and practices developed during this period provided continuity with apostolic foundations while integrating new organizational and legal frameworks, ensuring the resilience and cohesion of the Eastern Christian communities throughout the late Roman and early Byzantine periods. The integration of ecclesiastical hierarchy with imperial structures, the formalization of doctrinal orthodoxy through councils, and the establishment of Constantinople as a central ecclesiastical hub represent the defining developments of this period. By 381 AD, the Eastern Church had emerged as a legally recognized, hierarchically organized institution, capable of maintaining doctrinal coherence, liturgical uniformity, and administrative coordination across a geographically extensive region. These developments provided the foundation for the later evolution of the Eastern Orthodox Church as a distinct and enduring ecclesiastical body within the Eastern Roman Empire. The period between 381 and 451 AD represents a pivotal era in the consolidation of the Eastern Church, marked by doctrinal definition, formalization of hierarchical structures, and the integration of regional episcopal authority within the broader framework of imperial administration. This period saw the convening of major ecumenical councils whose outcomes were systematically recorded and enforced across the eastern provinces, shaping the organizational, liturgical, and theological identity of what would become the Eastern Orthodox Church. The Second Ecumenical Council, the Council of Constantinople in 381 AD, was convened following imperial endorsement by Theodosius I, whose letters and rescripts are preserved in imperial archives. The council reaffirmed the Nicene Creed established in 325 AD, elaborating the doctrine of the Trinity and codifying the equality of the Holy Spirit with the Father and the Son. The Acts of the Council, preserved in ecclesiastical records and referenced in subsequent canon law collections, enumerate the participating bishops, including representatives from Constantinople, Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem, demonstrating a coordinated hierarchical structure across the eastern provinces. The council also addressed disciplinary issues within the episcopate, issuing canons that regulated the conduct of bishops and the organization of dioceses. These canons formed the basis for regional ecclesiastical governance and standardized procedures for ordination, liturgical observance, and interbishop communication. The elevation of Constantinople as an ecclesiastical center during this period is documented in the council's proceedings, reflecting its status as the imperial capital. Canon 3 of the Council of Constantinople explicitly granted Constantinople precedence after Rome, citing its administrative significance within the empire. This codified the metropolitan authority of the Bishop of Constantinople over adjacent provinces, establishing a hierarchical precedent for metropolitan oversight that was recognized in subsequent synods. Correspondence between bishops preserved in later canonical compilations demonstrates the operationalization of this authority, including oversight of clergy appointments, adjudication of local disputes, and supervision of liturgical conformity. In the decades following 381 AD, doctrinal disputes continued to emerge within the eastern provinces, particularly regarding the nature of Christ. The Council of Ephesus in 431 AD, convened by Emperor Theodosius II and documented in the Council Acts, addressed the Christological controversy surrounding Nestorius, the Archbishop of Constantinople. The Council affirmed the theological position that the divine and human natures of Christ were inseparably united in one person, rejecting the dualistic interpretation advanced by Nestorius. The documented Acts list the attendance of bishops from key Eastern sees, including Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem, indicating both regional coordination and imperial endorsement. Canonical rulings from Ephesus mandated compliance by bishops and clergy, ensuring doctrinal uniformity and preserving hierarchical authority across the eastern provinces. The Council of Chalcedon in 451 AD represents a culmination of doctrinal consolidation and hierarchical codification within the Eastern Church. Convened under the authority of Emperor Marcian, the Council addressed continuing debates over Christological formulation, particularly in response to Eutychian positions that emphasized the Monophysite interpretation. The Council's Acts, preserved in ecclesiastical records and referenced in subsequent canonical codices, articulated the Chalcedonian definition, affirming that Christ exists in two natures, fully divine and fully human, united in one person. The Council also issued 28 canons regulating episcopal authority, clerical conduct, and the hierarchical status of key sees, including the primacy of Constantinople among Eastern metropolises following Alexandria. Letters exchanged among bishops, as documented in contemporaneous archives, ensured the dissemination and enforcement of these canons across Asia Minor, Syria, Egypt, and Palestine. The hierarchical structure of the Eastern Church during this period is documented in multiple sources, including the letters of Cyril of Alexandria, which provide evidence for the administration of dioceses, supervision of presbyters and deacons, and coordination with neighboring episcopal jurisdictions. Cyril's correspondence with bishops in Antioch, Jerusalem, and Constantinople illustrates the operational mechanisms by which doctrinal rulings were communicated and enforced, demonstrating a continuity of administrative practice across the eastern provinces. These records also document the procedures for addressing heretical positions, resolving disputes over liturgical practice, and regulating episcopal succession. Monasticism played a critical role in the doctrinal and liturgical consolidation of the Eastern Church during this period. Contemporary accounts, such as Palladius Laziac history, early 5th century, and the life of Basil of Caesarea, provide documentation of monastic communities in Cappadocia, Egypt, and Palestine. These communities functioned as centers for education, scriptural transcription, and theological discourse. Bishops maintained correspondence with monastic leaders to coordinate catechetical instruction, liturgical observance, and regional pastoral care. Monastic settlements were integrated into the broader ecclesiastical hierarchy, contributing to the standardization of worship practices, the preservation of doctrinal texts, and the administration of ecclesiastical property. The administrative coordination among Eastern bishops during this period is further documented in synodal letters and regional council records. For example, The Synod of Antioch in 445 AD, documented in surviving Acts, coordinated responses to Christological debates and codified disciplinary measures for clergy. Similar synodal activity is recorded in Alexandria and Jerusalem, illustrating the interconnected nature of episcopal governance across Eastern provinces. These gatherings established precedents for communication, procedural adjudication, and enforcement of doctrinal and liturgical standards, reinforcing the hierarchical framework established during the councils of Constantinople, Ephesus, and Chalcedon. Liturgical standardization in the Eastern Church advanced in parallel with hierarchical and doctrinal consolidation. Contemporary evidence, including catechetical instructions, letters, and inscriptions, indicates the codification of baptismal rites, Eucharistic practice, and the observance of liturgical feasts. The councils issued canons regulating the role of clergy in conducting sacraments, the supervision of catechumens, and the maintenance of sacramental records. Archaeological evidence from basilicas and early church structures across Constantinople, Antioch, Alexandria, and other Eastern cities corroborates the presence of standardized spaces for worship, instruction, and assembly, reflecting the practical implementation of liturgical and administrative directives. Regional episcopal authority was reinforced by both doctrinal enforcement and imperial collaboration. Letters preserved from Theodosius I and his successors demonstrate imperial endorsement of council decisions, including the Chalcedonian definition and the enforcement of disciplinary measures against clergy or communities resisting compliance. Bishops exercised authority over subordinate presbyters and deacons, regulated liturgical practice, and coordinated interprovincial communication, ensuring adherence to council canons. This integration of episcopal oversight with imperial sanction provided a stable framework for the governance of Eastern Christian communities across diverse political and cultural contexts. The codification of canonical authority during this period is documented in the collection and preservation of council canons, letters, and episcopal correspondence. These documents outline procedures for ordination, episcopal succession, disciplinary adjudication, and interdiocesan communication. The hierarchical network established across the eastern provinces relied upon formal documentation to maintain continuity and enforce compliance, ensuring that local deviations in practice or doctrine could be addressed through established channels. Evidence from the correspondence of Cyril of Alexandria, the Acts of Councils, and synodal letters demonstrates the operationalization of this administrative system. By 451 AD, the Eastern Church had achieved a structurally and doctrinally consolidated state. The councils of Constantinople, Ephesus, and Chalcedon defined Christological orthodoxy, standardized liturgical practice, and established hierarchical authority among key sees. Constantinople emerged as a central metropolitan authority, with Antioch, Alexandria, and Jerusalem maintaining defined jurisdictions. Bishops exercised oversight of presbyters and deacons, coordinated regional synods, and communicated across provinces to enforce doctrinal and disciplinary measures. Monastic communities were integrated into this framework, serving as centers of education, liturgical practice, and textual preservation. Archaeological, epistolary, and synodal evidence confirms the existence of standardized worship spaces, codified administration, and structured hierarchical networks across Eastern provinces. This period also laid the foundation for subsequent interactions between the Eastern and Western churches. While the Eastern Church consolidated doctrinal and administrative authority, correspondence with bishops in the Western provinces documented recognition of Nicene and Chalcedonian rulings. Imperial support, through legal protection and coordination with bishops, ensured the stability and expansion of Eastern Christianity, enabling communities to maintain cohesion across geographic, linguistic, and cultural diversity. The hierarchical, doctrinal, and liturgical systems established during this period provided the operational framework for the Eastern Church's continuity into the 6th century and beyond. The 6th through 8th centuries mark a period of consolidation for the Eastern Church within the Byzantine Empire, characterized by the formal codification of canon law, the integration of ecclesiastical and imperial authority, and the emergence of theological and liturgical identities distinctive to the Greek-speaking East. This period saw continued refinement of hierarchical structures, administrative procedures, and doctrinal enforcement, all documented in surviving imperial legislation, synodal acts, episcopal correspondence, and contemporary chronicles. The codification of canon law was significantly advanced during the reign of Emperor Justinian I, 527 to 565 AD. His Corpus Juris Civilis, while primarily a civil law compilation, included provisions regulating ecclesiastical administration, clerical conduct, and the relationship between the church and state. Surviving correspondence between Justinian and patriarchs, such as the letters to Patriarch Minas of Constantinople, demonstrates imperial oversight of episcopal appointments, doctrinal enforcement, and the adjudication of disputes among clergy. Justinian's legislative interventions codified procedures for ordination, the administration of sacraments, and the handling of heretical or schismatic movements, establishing a uniform framework for ecclesiastical governance across the eastern provinces. During this period, the Patriarchate of Constantinople solidified its central role in coordinating the Eastern Church. Canonical recognition of Constantinople's primacy among Eastern sees, established in the Fourth Ecumenical Council of Chalcedon for 51 AD, continued to influence administrative and doctrinal practice. Patriarchs presided over regional synods, mediated disputes between dioceses, and maintained correspondence with bishops in Antioch, Alexandria, and Jerusalem, as documented in synodal records and preserved letters. The coordination of metropolitan authority under Constantinople facilitated consistent enforcement of doctrinal decisions and liturgical standards across diverse provinces. The Monophysite controversy, which persisted after the Council of Chalcedon, illustrates the administrative and doctrinal challenges facing the Eastern Church. Imperial and episcopal records document measures undertaken to enforce adherence to Chalcedonian definitions, including the deposition and replacement of bishops who rejected the council's rulings. Surviving correspondence from the Patriarchate of Constantinople to regional bishops details procedural enforcement, the convening of local synods, and the supervision of clerical conduct to ensure compliance with established Christological doctrine. These measures reflect a systematic and hierarchical approach to maintaining doctrinal uniformity throughout the eastern provinces. The integration of monastic communities into the administrative framework of the Eastern Church continued during the 6th through 8th centuries. Contemporary records, including the life of Saint Sabas and the writings of John Moschus, document the organization of monastic settlements in Palestine, Egypt, and Asia Minor. Monasteries served as centers for theological education, scriptural copying, and the maintenance of liturgical tradition. Bishops maintained correspondence with abbots to coordinate catechesis, liturgical observance, and regional pastoral care. Monastic communities contributed to the preservation of canonical texts, providing continuity of doctrinal and administrative practices despite political or military disruptions in surrounding regions. The Byzantine Empire's legal and administrative structures intersected with ecclesiastical authority in the regulation of church property, construction, and liturgical practice. Surviving imperial edicts, such as those issued under Justinian and later emperors, document procedures for the construction and maintenance of basilicas, the allocation of land for ecclesiastical use, and the regulation of clerical remuneration. These records demonstrate a systematic approach to integrating church administration within imperial governance, ensuring that Eastern Christian communities maintained both hierarchical coherence and material stability. Inscriptions and archaeological evidence from Constantinople, Antioch, and Alexandria corroborate the implementation of these policies in urban and rural dioceses. During the 7th century, the Eastern Church faced additional challenges from external pressures, including the rapid expansion of Islamic polities in the Levant, Egypt, and North Africa. Contemporary sources, including chronicles and correspondence preserved in ecclesiastical archives, document the administrative adaptation of Eastern Christian communities under new political authorities. Bishops coordinated with remaining imperial and local authorities to maintain hierarchical oversight, enforce canonical discipline, and preserve liturgical practice. While these regions eventually fell under Islamic governance, documentation from this period demonstrates the resilience of ecclesiastical structures and the capacity of metropolitan centers such as Constantinople to provide oversight across distant provinces. The iconoclastic controversy, which began in the early 8th century, provides detailed documentation of the interaction between imperial authority and ecclesiastical administration. Edicts issued by Emperor Leo III, 726 to 741 AD, mandated the removal of religious images recorded in surviving imperial correspondence and synodal documents. Patriarchs of Constantinople, including Germanus I and later bishops, coordinated regional compliance or resistance, with letters and synodal acts documenting the enforcement of imperial directives, clerical discipline, and theological argumentation concerning the use of images. This controversy prompted the convening of synods, including the Council of Hieria, 754, whose acts document the formal endorsement of iconoclastic measures, as well as subsequent synods in the latter 8th century that restored icon veneration. These records illustrate the administrative mechanisms employed by patriarchs and bishops to implement or contest doctrinal directives under imperial authority. The period also saw the refinement of liturgical practices in the Eastern Church. Contemporary liturgical manuals, inscriptions, and correspondence documents standardized Eucharistic rites, baptismal procedures, and feast day observances across metropolitan jurisdictions. Bishops coordinated the dissemination of liturgical texts, the ordination of presbyters capable of performing sacraments, and the supervision of local clergy to ensure conformity with metropolitan standards. Archaeological evidence from basilicas, church mosaics, and ecclesiastical inscriptions provides material confirmation of these standardized liturgical practices, illustrating continuity and uniformity across diverse regions. Education and theological instruction were formalized during this period through episcopal oversight and monastic initiatives. Surviving letters, catechetical texts, and hagiographical accounts document procedures for the training of clergy, the instruction of catechumens, and the supervision of monastic schools. Bishops coordinated with monasteries and metropolitan centers to enforce doctrinal education, ensuring that both clergy and laity adhered to Chalcedonian orthodoxy. The preservation of manuscripts in monastic libraries, including theological treatises and biblical commentaries, provides material evidence of the administrative and educational structures supporting doctrinal continuity. The hierarchical network of the Eastern Church extended to regional synods and provincial councils. Records from these assemblies, including letters from the Patriarchate of Constantinople and synodal acts, document deliberations on disciplinary issues, the appointment of bishops, and the enforcement of canonical decrees. Metropolitan bishops convened provincial councils to adjudicate disputes among local clergy, supervise liturgical practice, and implement doctrinal rulings from ecumenical councils. These coordinated measures reflect a sophisticated administrative apparatus that ensured doctrinal uniformity, hierarchical accountability, and operational continuity across the eastern provinces. By the 8th century, the Eastern Church had established a comprehensive system integrating doctrinal enforcement, hierarchical governance, liturgical standardization, monastic coordination, and imperial interaction. Surviving documents, including council acts, episcopal correspondence, imperial edicts, and monastic records, provide verifiable evidence for the organizational, theological, and liturgical structures that defined the Eastern Church during this period. Constantinople functioned as the central metropolitan authority, overseeing adjacent dioceses, coordinating regional synods, and maintaining correspondence with Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem, thus ensuring continuity of governance and doctrinal coherence. The consolidation of the Eastern Church during the 6th through 8th centuries also involved the stabilization of ecclesiastical property and resources. Imperial legislation, corroborated by inscriptions and contemporary records, documented the transfer of land, the protection of church assets, and the regulation of clerical endowments. Bishops administered these resources, coordinated with metropolitan authorities, and ensured compliance with canonical and imperial regulations. The systematic management of material resources supported the continuity of liturgical practice, clerical remuneration, and monastic activity across the eastern provinces. The 9th century represents a period of expansion for the Eastern Church defined by systematic missionary activity, the spread of Eastern Christian liturgical and doctrinal practices beyond Greek-speaking regions, and the integration of new communities into the canonical authority of Constantinople. Contemporary documents, including letters from the Patriarchate, missionary correspondence, and synodal records, provide evidence of the administrative, theological, and educational methods employed in this expansion. In the early 9th century, the Byzantine Empire maintained ecclesiastical coordination through the Patriarchate of Constantinople, overseeing metropolitan jurisdictions in Asia Minor, the Balkans, and the Levant. Surviving correspondence between Constantinople and provincial bishops demonstrates a system in which doctrinal guidance, liturgical instruction, and administrative oversight were communicated through formal letters and synodal mandates. These records indicate that the Patriarchate retained canonical authority over new ecclesiastical foundations, while granting practical autonomy to local metropolises to conduct pastoral and missionary activities within their assigned territories. A critical aspect of the missionary expansion involved the evangelization of the Slavic peoples in the Balkans and Central Europe. Historical sources, including the accounts of Constantine, later Cyril, and Methodius, document the development of the Glagolitic alphabet and the translation of scriptural and liturgical texts into Slavonic. Letters preserved in Constantinople describe the imperial sanctioning of these activities, providing both legal and ecclesiastical authorization for the missionaries to establish liturgical practices in the vernacular language. These letters also delineate the responsibilities of local bishops to oversee the ordination of clergy trained in the new liturgical and scriptural system. The establishment of ecclesiastical structures in Slavic territories followed canonical procedures consistent with Eastern Church practice. Surviving records demonstrate that metropolises were appointed under the guidance of Constantinople, tasked with supervising subordinate bishops, ensuring adherence to doctrinal standards, and coordinating synodal gatherings to resolve local disputes. Documentation from the Patriarchate and regional synods confirms the maintenance of liturgical uniformity, even as translations into local languages introduced operational adaptations for pastoral effectiveness. Missionary activity also extended to Moravia, Pannonia, and other regions within the sphere of Byzantine influence. Letters from the Patriarchate, preserved in canonical collections, record correspondence with local rulers regarding the establishment of churches, the training of clergy, and the supervision of liturgical practices. These records provide evidence of hierarchical integration, whereby new communities were incorporated into the canonical system of the Eastern Church while maintaining practical independence for local administration. Correspondence emphasizes adherence to Chalcedonian orthodoxy, standard liturgical rites, and episcopal oversight, demonstrating the systematic expansion of Eastern Christian governance. The translation and dissemination of liturgical and scriptural texts into Slavonic represent a documented innovation in the Eastern Church's missionary strategy. Contemporary letters and administrative records note the production of psalters, lectionaries, and catechetical texts adapted to the vernacular. Bishops in Constantinople and Alexandria maintained correspondence regarding the accuracy of translations, the training of clergy, and the supervision of their use in public worship. Surviving texts confirm the coordinated effort to ensure doctrinal consistency while accommodating linguistic diversity, preserving canonical and liturgical norms established in the Greek-speaking core of the empire. The administrative integration of new dioceses in Slavic territories is further documented through synodal acts and episcopal correspondence. Regional councils were convened to approve the ordination of bishops, resolve disputes over liturgical practice, and implement directives from Constantinople. These acts demonstrate the hierarchical mechanisms by which the Eastern Church maintained authority across geographically and culturally diverse regions. Letters from Constantinople provide guidance on ecclesiastical discipline, the proper observance of feasts, and the enforcement of canonical standards, ensuring continuity with established metropolitan practices in Asia Minor, the Balkans, and the Levant. By the mid-9th century, the missionary expansion had resulted in the creation of a structured ecclesiastical presence among the Slavs. Documentation indicates that metropolitan bishops were responsible for supervising presbyters, deacons, and catechists, maintaining records of ordinations, and coordinating the dissemination of liturgical and scriptural texts. Correspondence between local clergy and Constantinople illustrates the use of synodal consultation to address doctrinal questions, liturgical anomalies, and disciplinary matters, reflecting the systematic extension of Eastern canonical authority into newly evangelized territories. The interaction between imperial authority and ecclesiastical administration facilitated the missionary expansion. Letters from Byzantine emperors to the patriarchate, preserved in official archives, confirm the provision of material resources, legal recognition, and diplomatic protection for missionary activities. These records detail the allocation of funding for church construction, the provision of clerical stipends, and the endorsement of missionary appointments. Imperial oversight ensured that missionary efforts adhered to canonical and doctrinal standards, reinforcing hierarchical integration and continuity with established ecclesiastical structures. The 9th century also saw the development of local monastic communities in newly evangelized regions, functioning as centers of education, liturgical instruction, and scriptural copying. Contemporary accounts, including correspondence from Constantinople and regional synodal records, document the role of monastic settlements in training clergy, preserving canonical texts, and supporting liturgical observance. Monasteries in Slavic territories maintained communication with metropolitan centers, ensuring adherence to doctrinal norms and hierarchical accountability. These records confirm the operational integration of monastic communities into the broader administrative framework of the Eastern Church. The hierarchical coordination of missionary activity extended to the supervision of episcopal appointments and the enforcement of canonical discipline. Letters from Constantinople detail procedures for ordaining bishops, verifying the orthodoxy of candidates, and supervising the conduct of clergy in newly established dioceses. Synodal records from regional councils document compliance with canonical procedures, adjudicate disputes among clergy, and ensure uniform liturgical observance. These mechanisms demonstrate the administrative capacity of the Eastern Church to extend its authority into regions with distinct cultural and linguistic characteristics, maintaining doctrinal and hierarchical coherence. Liturgical adaptation was a key component of missionary strategy. Surviving documents, including translated psalters and lectionaries, confirm the integration of vernacular language with established Byzantine liturgical forms. Bishops and metropolises provided oversight for the correct performance of sacraments, including baptism, Eucharist, and chrismation, ensuring that vernacular adaptation did not compromise doctrinal integrity. Correspondence with Constantinople emphasizes fidelity to Chalcedonian orthodoxy while recognizing the practical necessities of linguistic translation for effective pastoral care. The missionary expansion of the 9th century established enduring ecclesiastical structures that facilitated subsequent development in the 10th and 11th centuries. Letters, synodal acts, and monastic records provide continuous documentation of hierarchical oversight, doctrinal enforcement, liturgical standardization, and administrative coordination across the expanded Eastern Church. These records confirm the systematic integration of new communities into the canonical authority of Constantinople, maintaining operational continuity with established sees in Asia Minor, the Balkans, and the Levant. By the late 9th century, the Eastern Church had established a durable and coordinated presence among the Slavic peoples. Metropolises oversaw subordinate bishops, coordinated synods, supervised clergy, and ensured the dissemination of doctrinal and liturgical texts. Monastic communities functioned as centers of education and textual preservation, maintaining communication with Constantinople to guarantee hierarchical and canonical conformity. Imperial support reinforced ecclesiastical authority, providing legal recognition, funding, and administrative oversight, thereby stabilizing missionary efforts and integrating new communities into the structure of the Eastern Church. The success of these missionary initiatives relied on a combination of hierarchical authority, doctrinal oversight, liturgical standardization, and institutional infrastructure. Surviving letters, synodal records, translated texts, and monastic accounts document the procedural rigor with which the Eastern Church extended its influence into newly evangelized territories. These records provide verifiable evidence of the operational mechanisms employed by the Patriarchate of Constantinople and regional metropolises to ensure doctrinal, liturgical, and administrative continuity across culturally diverse regions. The 10th and 11th centuries mark the final phase of the Eastern Church's pre-schism consolidation, defined by doctrinal, liturgical, and administrative developments that established a distinct ecclesiastical identity within the Byzantine Empire. During this period, the Patriarchate of Constantinople maintained canonical authority over the eastern provinces while coordinating with other major sees, including Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem. Contemporary records, including synodal acts, episcopal correspondence, imperial legislation, and liturgical texts, provide detailed documentation of hierarchical structure, doctrinal enforcement, and operational procedures that defined the Eastern Church before the formal division with Rome in 1054. The 10th century witnessed the stabilization of metropolitan and episcopal jurisdictions across the Byzantine Empire. Surviving correspondence from the Patriarchate of Constantinople to provincial metropolitans documents the regulation of clerical appointments, the supervision of subordinate bishops, and the coordination of regional synods. These letters detail canonical procedures for ordination, disciplinary enforcement, and the resolution of disputes among clergy, reflecting an operational framework that preserved hierarchical coherence across culturally diverse and geographically dispersed dioceses. Metropolitan bishops maintained oversight of local presbyters and deacons, ensuring compliance with established liturgical and doctrinal standards derived from the ecumenical councils. The consolidation of Eastern liturgical practice continued during this period. Contemporary sources, including service books, hymnals, and catechetical instructions, document the standardization of the divine liturgy, the administration of sacraments, and the observance of feast days. Metropolitan and episcopal authorities coordinated the dissemination of liturgical texts and instructions, as evidenced in letters from Constantinople and provincial synodal records. These documents provide verifiable evidence of hierarchical oversight in maintaining uniform worship practices, ensuring that newly established or remote dioceses adhered to Byzantine liturgical norms. Imperial interaction with the Eastern Church remained integral to the enforcement of canonical and administrative structures. Surviving imperial edicts and rescripts detail the endorsement of episcopal appointments, the adjudication of disputes between bishops, and the protection of ecclesiastical property. Letters from emperors such as Basil II, R. 976 to 1025, and Constantine VIII document the coordination of civil and ecclesiastical authority, ensuring that metropolitan and diocesan structures operated effectively within the framework of imperial law. These records demonstrate the integration of ecclesiastical governance into the administrative apparatus of the Byzantine state, providing continuity of oversight and stability. During the 10th century, missionary activity from the Byzantine Empire continued, with documented expansion into Kievan Rus. The account of the Christianization of Rus preserved in primary sources, such as the primary chronicle and letters exchanged between Constantinople and regional ecclesiastical authorities, provides evidence for the appointment of bishops, the construction of churches, and the implementation of Byzantine liturgical practices. Metropolitan oversight from Constantinople ensured adherence to Chalcedonian orthodoxy, while local bishops managed day-to-day administration and pastoral care. Documentation includes the ordination of clergy trained in Greek liturgical traditions, the translation of liturgical texts, and correspondence confirming canonical compliance. Doctrinal disputes during the 10th and 11th centuries were addressed through regional synods and patriarchal correspondence. Letters and synodal records document the enforcement of the filioque controversy, the clarification of Eucharistic practices, and the resolution of disputes concerning clerical conduct and liturgical observance. Metropolitan bishops convened provincial councils to adjudicate local disputes and implement decisions from Constantinople, ensuring continuity with ecumenical council rulings. These procedures, documented in episcopal correspondence and synodal acts, reflect a systematic administrative approach to doctrinal enforcement. The relationship between the Patriarchate of Constantinople and other Eastern sees, including Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem, is well documented during this period. Letters, synodal records, and canonical texts demonstrate coordination in the enforcement of doctrinal and liturgical standards, the appointment of bishops, and the supervision of metropolitan jurisdictions. These sources confirm that Constantinople maintained primacy within the eastern provinces while recognizing the autonomy of other patriarchates in administering local ecclesiastical affairs, establishing a network of hierarchical authority consistent with canonical precedent. Monastic institutions continued to play a central role in ecclesiastical and administrative life. Contemporary accounts, including letters preserved in the patriarchal archives and monastic chronicles, document the supervision of monasteries by metropolitan and episcopal authorities. Monastic communities provided centers for education, the copying and preservation of texts, liturgical training, and the coordination of regional pastoral activities. Bishops corresponded with abbots to ensure compliance with canonical regulations, the maintenance of property records, and adherence to established liturgical practices. These sources provide verifiable evidence for the operational integration of monastic communities into the hierarchical structure of the Eastern Church. Liturgical and theological education was maintained through a system of episcopal oversight, monastic instruction, and correspondence with Constantinople. Letters preserved in synodal records detail the responsibilities of bishops in training presbyters, supervising deacons, and instructing catechumens. Monastic schools served as centers for scriptural study and doctrinal instruction, producing clerics capable of administering sacraments and maintaining liturgical fidelity. These practices are documented in contemporary texts, including catechetical manuals, liturgical commentaries, and episcopal correspondence, confirming a standardized educational framework across Eastern dioceses. The 11th century saw increasing tension with the Western Church over issues of papal primacy, liturgical divergence, and theological interpretation. Letters between the Patriarchate of Constantinople and regional metropolises document concerns regarding the unilateral addition of the Filioque clause by the Western Church, as well as disputes over the appropriate administration of the Eucharist and clerical jurisdiction. Synodal acts from provincial councils record deliberations on these issues, emphasizing adherence to established canonical procedures and ecumenical council rulings. These records illustrate a systematic and documented approach to resolving doctrinal and administrative challenges without reliance on interpretive or anecdotal evidence. The culmination of pre-schism developments in the Eastern Church is documented in the coordination of hierarchical structures, doctrinal enforcement, and liturgical standardization. Letters from the Patriarchate, synodal records, and imperial correspondence detail the supervision of diocesan and metropolitan bishops, the enforcement of canonical norms, and the coordination of regional councils. These documents confirm the operational mechanisms employed by the Eastern Church to maintain coherence across culturally and geographically diverse territories, integrating newly evangelized regions, monastic institutions, and metropolitan centers into a cohesive ecclesiastical network. The role of Constantinople as the central authority for Eastern Christianity was reinforced through imperial endorsement, documented in edicts and rescripts confirming the Patriarchate's primacy and jurisdiction over adjacent metropolitan territories. Metropolitan bishops documented compliance with these directives through correspondence and synodal reports, maintaining hierarchical accountability and ensuring adherence to established canonical procedures. These sources collectively confirm the structural and operational coherence of the Eastern Church before the formal division with the Western Church. Administrative procedures for maintaining doctrinal and liturgical consistency included episcopal oversight of subordinate clergy, regional synodal adjudication of disputes, and systematic dissemination of liturgical texts. Letters, synodal acts, and archival records demonstrate that bishops were responsible for ensuring uniform performance of the sacraments, compliance with canonical directives, and supervision of clerical conduct. The Metropolitan Authority coordinated the activities of local bishops, integrating new or remote dioceses into a standardized ecclesiastical framework that maintained continuity with the Patriarchate of Constantinople. By the mid-11th century, the Eastern Church had consolidated a distinct ecclesiastical identity. Surviving records indicate that hierarchical authority, doctrinal orthodoxy, liturgical standardization, monastic integration, and imperial coordination collectively defined operational procedures across Eastern provinces. Constantinople retained primacy while coordinating with Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem, ensuring the enforcement of canonical and doctrinal norms. These structures provided the foundation for continuity of governance, theological coherence, and liturgical practice, leading to the events of 1054. The year 1054 represents the formal division between the Eastern and Western branches of Christianity, an event documented in ecclesiastical letters, synodal correspondence, and contemporary chronicles. This period reflects the culmination of centuries of administrative, doctrinal, and liturgical divergence, particularly in the context of hierarchical authority, theological formulation, and imperial interaction. The recorded events of 1054 provide a precise historical framework for understanding the separation of the Eastern Orthodox Church from the Latin Church. The Eastern Church by 1054 maintained a hierarchical structure centered on the Patriarchate of Constantinople, with metropolises and diocesan bishops overseeing subordinate clergy in the Balkans, Asia Minor, the Levant, and areas evangelized in previous centuries. Patriarch Michael I Cerularius, documented in synodal records and imperial correspondence, exercised authority over metropolitan and diocesan bishops, coordinated regional synods, and maintained canonical oversight over ecclesiastical affairs within Byzantine jurisdiction. The Patriarchate maintained communication with Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem, ensuring doctrinal and liturgical conformity throughout the eastern provinces. Doctrinal divergence with the Western Church, documented in correspondence and synodal letters, had developed over centuries before 1054. Eastern records indicate disputes regarding the addition of the Filioque clause to the Nicene Creed by Western bishops, liturgical differences such as the practice of unleavened bread in the Eucharist, and variations in clerical discipline, including celibacy requirements. Patriarchal letters and synodal acts reveal that the Eastern Church maintained adherence to Chalcedonian orthodoxy and prior ecumenical council rulings, coordinating with metropolitan and diocesan bishops to ensure compliance across diverse territories. The events culminating in the schism involved formal exchanges between the Eastern and Western hierarchies. In 1054, Cardinal Humbert, representing Pope Leo IX, was dispatched to Constantinople with letters and mandates about papal authority and doctrinal enforcement. Contemporary records, including letters from the Patriarchate and the Papal Legation, document the proceedings, including Humbert's presentation of papal directives and the responses of Patriarch Michael I Cerularius. These documents confirm the formal communication of grievances, the presentation of canonical arguments, and the procedural adherence to hierarchical norms on both sides. Patriarch Michael I Cerularius convened a synod to address the papal legation's communications. Synodal acts, preserved in the patriarchal archives, detail the formal response rejecting unilateral papal claims of universal jurisdiction, citing canonical precedent, the primacy of Constantinople within Eastern jurisdictions, and adherence to ecumenical council rulings. The synod coordinated the participation of metropolitan and diocesan bishops, ensuring that the response reflected the collective authority of the Eastern Church and maintained hierarchical coherence across the Byzantine provinces. The mutual excommunication that formalized the division is documented in surviving letters and synodal records. Cardinal Humbert's acts include the delivery of the bull of excommunication directed at Patriarch Michael I Cerularius, while contemporaneous patriarchal correspondence records the subsequent excommunication of the papal legation and acknowledgement of the severance of liturgical and administrative communion. These documents detail procedural steps, canonical references, and hierarchical authorization for the excommunication, reflecting a structured, verifiable process rather than anecdotal or interpretive accounts. Liturgical practices remained a point of formal divergence at the time of the schism. Eastern records document the continued use of leavened bread in the Eucharist, the observance of the Byzantine liturgical calendar, and clerical marriage regulations consistent with prior canonical rulings. Correspondence between the Patriarchate and metropolises provides evidence for the enforcement of these practices, including oversight of subordinate clergy, supervision of sacramental administration, and coordination of regional synods to address deviations. These records establish the operational continuity of Eastern liturgical and canonical norms immediately prior to and following the events of 1054. Administrative and territorial structures were also formally codified in the Eastern Church at the time of the Schism. Metropolitan bishops oversaw diocesan bishops and subordinate clergy, coordinated regional synods, and maintained correspondence with Constantinople. Surviving letters document procedures for ordination, disciplinary enforcement, property management, and the resolution of disputes within dioceses. These mechanisms ensured hierarchical integrity and operational continuity, providing the institutional framework for the Eastern Church to function independently of Western ecclesiastical authority. The schism's formalization was reinforced by imperial interaction. Byzantine imperial correspondence and rescripts confirm recognition of the patriarchate's authority, endorsement of synodal decisions, and protection of ecclesiastical property and personnel. These records indicate that the Eastern Church operated within the framework of imperial law, coordinating administration, doctrinal enforcement, and regional oversight in accordance with civil and canonical norms. The integration of imperial support with patriarchal authority ensured the stability and continuity of the Eastern Church following the Schism. Contemporary chronicles and ecclesiastical accounts from Constantinople provide detailed documentation of procedural steps taken in response to the papal legation. Synodal records enumerate the participation of metropolitan and diocesan bishops, the canonical basis for rejecting unilateral papal claims, and the administrative measures implemented to preserve doctrinal and liturgical integrity. Letters circulated among the eastern provinces confirmed the continuation of established practices, maintained hierarchical oversight, and provided formal instructions to clergy regarding ecclesiastical governance in the absence of Western communion. The Eastern Church's continuation as a distinct ecclesiastical entity following 1054 is further documented in subsequent correspondence and synodal acts. Patriarchs and metropolises maintained canonical authority over dioceses, coordinated synodal activity, and supervised the administration of sacraments. Monastic communities continued to serve as centers for education, liturgical practice, and textual preservation, maintaining communication with Constantinople to ensure compliance with canonical norms. These documented structures confirm the operational independence of the Eastern Church and its capacity to sustain hierarchical, doctrinal, and liturgical continuity post-schism. Regional episcopal oversight remained integral to the Eastern Church's administration. Letters and synodal records document the supervision of subordinate clergy, coordination of sacramental practice, enforcement of canonical discipline, and adjudication of disputes. Metropolitan bishops convened provincial councils to address administrative and doctrinal matters, ensuring uniform adherence to established procedures. These mechanisms, corroborated by correspondence and synodal documentation, provided a systematic and verifiable framework for ecclesiastical governance following the separation from the Western Church. Doctrinal continuity was maintained through adherence to Chalcedonian orthodoxy and prior ecumenical council rulings. Surviving correspondence and synodal acts confirm that bishops were responsible for implementing theological directives, supervising catechesis, and ensuring conformity of liturgical texts. The Patriarchate of Constantinople exercised central coordination over doctrinal enforcement, issuing instructions to metropolitans and diocesan bishops regarding the interpretation and application of canonical and theological norms. These documents demonstrate the procedural and operational mechanisms preserving Eastern Orthodoxy in the absence of communion with the Western Church. The division between East and West in 1054 was formalized without disruption to the internal hierarchical and administrative structure of the Eastern Church. Contemporary records, including synodal acts, episcopal correspondence, imperial edicts, and monastic accounts, demonstrate the continued functionality of diocesan and metropolitan governance, the enforcement of doctrinal and liturgical standards, and the coordination of regional ecclesiastical activity. The Eastern Church maintained operational coherence, hierarchical integrity, and doctrinal orthodoxy, establishing the institutional continuity that characterizes the Eastern Orthodox Church in subsequent centuries. The events of 1054 are corroborated by multiple contemporary sources, including papal letters, synodal records from Constantinople, imperial rescripts, and chronicles from metropolitan centers. These documents collectively provide a verifiable historical account of procedural steps, hierarchical interactions, and doctrinal clarifications that formalize the separation. They confirm the systematic nature of the schism as a result of documented administrative, doctrinal, and liturgical divergences rather than anecdotal or interpretive narratives. From its inception in the 1st century, the Eastern Church maintained continuous structural, doctrinal, and liturgical development across the territories of the Eastern Mediterranean, Asia Minor, the Balkans, and regions later evangelized in Central and Eastern Europe. Records from the earliest Christian communities indicate that local leadership was organized under bishops, presbyters, and deacons, functioning within a coordinated network that ensured doctrinal coherence and sacramental integrity. Letters from apostles such as Paul, Peter, and John, preserved in the canonical epistolary corpus, confirm the establishment of these ecclesiastical frameworks in cities including Jerusalem, Antioch, and Ephesus. These foundational structures persisted, documented in episcopal correspondence and early synodal records, forming the basis for hierarchical and doctrinal continuity in the Eastern Church. During the first 3 centuries, the Church's operational framework expanded under conditions of Roman administration and intermittent persecution. Bishops in Antioch, Alexandria, and Jerusalem gained regional prominence, as evidenced by letters from Ignatius of Antioch and Polycarp of Smyrna. Imperial records, including rescripts under Nero, Decius, and Diocletian, document both punitive measures against Christian communities and subsequent legal interactions that influenced ecclesiastical administration. These records provide a verifiable account of the Church's continuity despite external pressures, highlighting the adaptation of hierarchical and liturgical systems in response to regulatory and civic frameworks. The 4th century marked a critical transition as the Church gained imperial recognition. The Edict of Milan in 313 AD formalized legal tolerance for Christianity, and the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD codified Christological definitions and ecclesiastical order. Contemporary records, including the acts of the council and letters exchanged between Emperor Constantine and participating bishops, demonstrate the establishment of metropolitan and diocesan hierarchies under canonical regulation. The elevation of Constantinople as an imperial and ecclesiastical center following its founding in 330 AD further reinforced central coordination for the Eastern Church. Patriarchal correspondence and regional synodal records confirm the administrative and doctrinal authority exercised by Constantinople over Eastern sees, maintaining conformity with ecumenical council rulings. The 5th century continued doctrinal consolidation through successive ecumenical councils. The Council of Ephesus for 31 AD and the Council of Chalcedon for 51 AD addressed Christological disputes and established canonical precedents for the patriarchates of Alexandria, Antioch, Jerusalem, and Constantinople. Surviving synodal acts and letters document the procedural and hierarchical enforcement of council rulings, including the deposition or appointment of bishops and the coordination of metropolitan oversight. These records illustrate the operational mechanisms through which doctrinal uniformity and hierarchical governance were maintained, forming the enduring structural foundation of the Eastern Church. Between the 6th and 8th centuries, the Byzantine Empire integrated imperial administration with ecclesiastical governance, as documented in Justinian I's legislative corpus and patriarchal correspondence. Codification of canon law regulated ordination, clerical discipline, sacramental administration, and monastic organization. Monastic settlements in Palestine, Egypt, and Asia Minor, recorded in contemporary accounts such as the life of Saint Sabas and the writings of John Moschus, served as centers for textual preservation, liturgical training, and administrative coordination. Patriarchs of Constantinople supervised regional synods, enforced canonical discipline, and maintained correspondence with subordinate metropolitans and diocesan bishops, ensuring continuity of governance, doctrine, and liturgical practice across Byzantine territories. The 8th century was defined by the iconoclastic controversy, which is thoroughly documented in imperial edicts, synodal records, and patriarchal letters. Emperor Leo III's edicts mandating the removal of religious images prompted synodal proceedings, including the Council of Hieria, 754 AD, and subsequent acts restoring icon veneration. These records detail the procedural steps taken by patriarchs and bishops to implement, enforce, or contest imperial directives, illustrating the systematic interaction of ecclesiastical authority and state regulation. Surviving correspondence demonstrates the hierarchical coordination required to preserve doctrinal and liturgical continuity amid contested theological policies. The 9th century represents the systematic expansion of the Eastern Church into Slavic territories. Missionary activity by Constantine, Cyril, and Methodius is documented in letters preserved in Constantinople, canonical records, and ecclesiastical correspondence. The creation of the Glagolitic alphabet and translation of liturgical texts into Slavonic were undertaken with explicit patriarchal and imperial sanction. Metropolitan bishops were appointed to supervise newly evangelized regions, ensuring compliance with doctrinal orthodoxy, adherence to Byzantine liturgical norms, and procedural integrity in clerical training and sacramental administration. Monastic settlements functioned as centers for education, textual preservation, and liturgical standardization, maintaining communication with Constantinople and integrating local communities into the canonical framework of the Eastern Church. The 10th and 11th centuries represent the culmination of pre-schism consolidation. Hierarchical structures, doctrinal enforcement, and liturgical standardization were formally operationalized across Byzantine territories and newly evangelized regions. Patriarchal correspondence, metropolitan letters, and synodal records document procedures for ordination, disciplinary enforcement, the supervision of monastic communities, and the dissemination of liturgical texts. Interaction with the imperial administration, as evidenced in edicts and rescripts, provided legal recognition, protection of ecclesiastical property, and coordination of administrative oversight. The Church's operation during this period demonstrates documented procedural continuity, ensuring uniformity of doctrine, hierarchical authority, and liturgical practice across culturally and geographically diverse dioceses. By 1054, formal divergence from the Western Church was realized through documented disputes over papal primacy, the Filioque clause, and liturgical practices, including the use of leavened versus unleavened bread in the Eucharist. Contemporary records, including synodal acts, letters from Patriarch Michael I Cerularius, and papal correspondence with Cardinal Humbert, provide verifiable documentation of procedural steps leading to mutual excommunication. The Eastern Church's continuation as a distinct institution following these events is documented through episcopal letters, synodal records, imperial rescripts, and monastic accounts, confirming operational continuity of hierarchical governance, doctrinal orthodoxy, and liturgical practice. Throughout the period from 30 AD to 1054 AD, the Eastern Church maintained a coherent and documented institutional framework. Hierarchical structures, centered on the Patriarchate of Constantinople, coordinated metropolitan and diocesan oversight, supervised monastic and missionary activities, and enforced canonical and doctrinal norms. Liturgical standardization was achieved through episcopal and monastic oversight, the dissemination of service books, and the translation of texts for newly evangelized regions. Doctrinal consistency was enforced via correspondence, synodal acts, and adherence to ecumenical council rulings. Imperial interaction provided legal, administrative, and material support, reinforcing the stability and continuity of Eastern ecclesiastical authority. Monastic institutions functioned consistently as centers for education, scriptural preservation, and liturgical training, maintaining communication with metropolitan and patriarchal authorities to ensure uniformity and compliance with canonical norms. Missionary activity, particularly in Slavic regions, was formally sanctioned and coordinated, resulting in the establishment of diocesan structures, episcopal oversight, and liturgical adaptation within the parameters of Byzantine orthodoxy. Archival records, synodal correspondence, and surviving texts document the operational mechanisms of this expansion, confirming systematic integration into the canonical structure of the Eastern Church. In conclusion, the historical record from 30 AD through 1054 AD demonstrates that the Eastern Church evolved as a distinct, hierarchical, and doctrinally consistent institution. Surviving evidence, including letters, synodal acts, imperial legislation, monastic chronicles, liturgical texts, and ecclesiastical correspondence, provides continuous documentation of administrative procedures, doctrinal enforcement, and hierarchical coordination. The development of metropolitan and diocesan structures, integration of monastic communities, systematic missionary activity, and engagement with imperial authority ensured operational continuity and liturgical standardization. These verifiable mechanisms preserve the integrity of doctrine, hierarchy, and sacramental practice across diverse territories and establish the enduring foundation of the Eastern Orthodox Church. The formal separation from the Western Church in 1054, documented in correspondence, synodal acts, and imperial records, represents the culmination of these developments rather than a rupture in institutional continuity. The Eastern Church maintained established hierarchical oversight, doctrinal orthodoxy, liturgical practice, and administrative coordination under the Patriarchate of Constantinople. Contemporary records verify that the Church's governance, missionary activities, monastic institutions, and sacramental administration continued without interruption, providing historical evidence for the operational and doctrinal coherence of the Eastern Orthodox Church in the post-schism period. The period from the 1st century to 1054 demonstrates consistent procedural development, hierarchical integration, and doctrinal standardization. Apostolic letters, ecumenical council acts, patriarchal correspondence, synodal records, and imperial edicts provide a continuous documentary trail that confirms the Church's evolution as a structured, hierarchical, and operationally coherent institution. Monastic networks, missionary expansion, liturgical codification, and canonical enforcement collectively contributed to the institutional durability and continuity that characterized the Eastern Orthodox Church. The historical evidence, preserved across multiple contemporary sources, establishes the Eastern Church as a resilient and systematically organized institution. It evolved in response to internal doctrinal challenges, regional expansion, linguistic diversity, and imperial governance while maintaining fidelity to canonical, liturgical, and hierarchical norms. The formal division in 1054 was a documented administrative and doctrinal separation rather than a discontinuity in governance or practice. The continuity of operations, documented procedures, and hierarchical oversight ensured that the Eastern Church maintained its identity, doctrinal integrity, and liturgical practice, laying the foundation for its subsequent historical development.